Well, let me start off by saying good morning, everybody. I want to thank the Berkeley Labor Center for hosting this event, but more importantly, for the incredible work that you do each and every day. We want to thank them very much. Let's hear it for the Labor Center. And Art, I want to thank you for that kind introduction, but I also want to thank you for all that you do for workers in California and nationally. As a leader of the AFL-CIO's state and local committee, you do a great job and you're a great leader and a great friend. Thank you, pal. And I also want to recognize two very special union sisters, Sharan Burrow, General Secretary of the ITUC, who's a force for workers' rights on the global stage, and AFL-CIO Secretary-Treasurer Liz Schuler, my trusted partner, who is pushing the labor movement to be bold and to think big. Liz, thank you. So we're here in the Bay Area this week to demonstrate the power of working people coming together to make lasting social and economic change. On Monday, Secretary-Treasurer Schuler laid out a very, very strong vision for investing our resources wisely at the Committee on Workers' Capital Conference. Tomorrow, we'll head over to the Moscone Center where I'll talk to about 5,000 environmentalists. And there, I look forward to pledging the labor movement's 100% commitment to fighting climate change. But I'm also going to make clear that the only path forward is by investing in a better, more inclusive, more just future for our families and for our communities, because you simply can't leave anyone behind in this process. Working people won't allow the fight against climate change to become another excuse to continue the attacks on the working class. See, right now in this country, something's happening. Collective action is on the rise. And even the White House is noticing, as Art mentioned, you heard that the president said good morning to me on Labor Day. And I can tell you, I smiled all day because of that. But as he was doing that, Gallup just released a poll that found our approval rating, the labor movement's approval rating, is at 62% and rising. That's a 15-year high. I was going to mention that his was at 40%, but I think I'll skip that. You see, right now, working people from coast to coast are recognizing that the best way to achieve our dreams is by standing with the person next to us. You know, finding strength in each other, fighting together. 262,000 new members joined the unions, the AFL-CIO, in 2017. Yeah. And here's the best part of it. 3/4 of them were under the age of 35. So they're going to be around for a while. So we're rallying the next generation to our cause, and our popularity is reaching new heights across the country, and that's good news. And new research from MIT shows half of all non-union workers out there would vote for a union today if they were given the chance. You see, working people want to stand together in a union. Working people want a voice on the job. And if you want fresh proof of our momentum, look no further than the state of Missouri. Last month, voters went there to the polls to decide the future of right to work. A group of small-minded politicians passed right-to-work law in Missouri. We said, we don't think it'll stand. What was on the ballot, and 67% of the vote in the Show Me state sent that horrible law to the dustbin where it belongs. It wasn't even close. And it goes to show you how out of touch that legislature and the Supreme Court that we have right now are. The direction they want to go is the exact opposite of where the most of the citizens in the country want to go right now. Because you remember, after the Supreme Court ruled against us in Janus, I remember a lot of pundits wondering if that was just a death knell of the labor movement. Well, brothers and sisters, they got their answer in Missouri. And listen to what the Chamber of Commerce said there. I'm particularly happy about their response. They said, for every punch that we threw, the labor movement hit us back 10 times. And all I have to say to them is, you ain't seen nothing yet. See, we knocked on about 800,000 doors there. We made more than 1 million phone calls. We spoke to over 1,000 different work sites, talking about good union jobs and the power of collective action. And it wasn't just locals who were on the ground. Trade unionists, quite frankly, from around the country went to Missouri to pitch in. The California Labor Federation was there. The LA County Fed was there. The Sacramento Central Labor Council was there, and many, many others. And you know who was there in full force? IBEW 1245. And I want to thank you. Tom, thanks, man. Stand up, buddy. You deserve a round of applause. Thank you, brother. Tom, I want to tell you that you really showed America what solidarity is all about. I want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts and your members. See, brothers and sisters, 2018 is going to be the year of the worker. We're rising together as one to build a nation that honors our labor. And we're not going to accept an economy that only works for a handful of elites. We won't back down, and we won't settle for less. We see a new spirit of progressive collectivism all across the country. And think about what's going on. Immigrant workers are putting aspiration above fear. Black Lives Matter, the Me Too movement, young people demanding safe schools, the fight for LGBTQ equality, civil disobedience to resist the horrible nomination of Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. More women and people of color and progressives and union members are running for office, and they're winning. And of course, the incredible, powerful teacher strikes with big victories in states where collective bargaining for teachers is actually illegal, and union busting is a time-honored pastime. All of that's happening. It's on the rise. And each of those movements is a powerful rallying cry for change, driven by collective action. As a labor movement, it's our job to ignite the flames of justice, not to contain them. And that's exactly how we'll be successful in fighting against climate change, by demanding justice for working people and ensuring that no one is left behind. Now, most of you know that I started out as a coal miner. As Art said, I grew up in Nemacolin, a small community in southwestern Pennsylvania, and it was truly a company town. The company owned everything in that town except two things: the Union Hall and the Catholic Church. They tried to exercise total control over us. And they even tried to control reality by ignoring and muddying scientific facts to suit their own interests. You see, it was expensive for them to support the mine entries. So the company simply disregarded structural realities of digging coal miles underground. It cost money to properly ventilate the mine. So they told us the air was great when it was actually filled with coal dust and explosive gases. And worst of all, they claimed that breathing coal dust was good for you. That's true. In 1969, their representative stood up in front of me at a field hearing and said, "We have proof positive that breathing coal dust is good for you." After he spoke, I got up and I said, "We have good news for my learned colleague. If breathing coal dust is so good for you, we'll gladly pump it through your heating and air conditioning units so you can join in the good health." You see, but of course, the laws of science always prevail, so that tunnels that without support cave in. Mines filled with methane explode. Miners' lungs filled with coal dust have no room for oxygen. And an atmosphere pumped full of carbon will heat up the planet to a point that imperils human civilization. And as we speak, right now, a huge hurricane is headed towards the East Coast. And its power is being fed by Atlantic waters that are warmer than average. And its impact is sure to be exacerbated by sea and ground levels rising under higher than average rain. Now, averages, of course, are constantly changing as we set climate records, and not in a good way. For this reason, and for many more, I'm here on behalf of the American labor movement to make absolutely clear that we remain committed to the task of stopping runaway climate change. And I say we remain because as the fight against climate change has taken on increased urgency, the labor movement in the United States and globally has supported urgent action. We supported the Real Comprehensive Climate Bill, Waxman-Markey. We supported the Paris Accord, and we opposed President Trump's destructive decision to withdraw from it. And for the first time ever, at our national convention last October, the AFL-CIO passed a climate resolution, adopted unanimously, with the outspoken support of the unions whose members work in the energy sector. And that part is very critical because the workers most impacted by a move away from carbon fuels came together and they endorsed a plan to save our people and to save our planet. Now, our resolution strongly asserts that the fastest and the most equitable way to address climate change is for labor to be at the center of creating solutions that reduce emissions while investing in our communities, maintaining and creating high union wage jobs, and reducing poverty. Now, we know it can be done because it's happening right now. From California to New York, the labor movement is putting our political weight behind efforts to fight climate change while winning strong labor standards in the process. This isn't only good policy, it's good politics. It's proving that big, transformational change happens faster when labor is at the table. See, make no mistake, this is not easy for us. For millions of workers in the United States, our livelihoods, our families, our communities, sometimes our whole way of life are at stake. Not decades from now, but right now. See, we're prepared to make the tough choices. We're willing to sacrifice. But we will not bear the cost of climate policy alone. The most privileged in our society must give their fair share as well. And we will make sure that that happens by standing together. You see, the main challenge for fighting climate change is not technological or scientific. It's economic and political. Because we have the technology to take on climate change. And every day that technology improves. Save for a handful of climate deniers, we know that human beings are causing climate change with catastrophic results. So, the most important question we face today is how to create a sustainable, low-carbon global economy of broadly shared prosperity. How do we embrace a vision that changes the politics of climate change? What can we do together to overcome the cynicism and rising authoritarianism across the globe that keeps us from moving forward faster to fight climate change, even as our own behavior threatens the very fabric of civilization? Now, successful action will require more than an understanding of climate science. We must think carefully about how to actually make change, and to be successful, it has to begin with dialogue and with negotiation with those whose lives and communities, health care and pensions are bound up with carbon-based fuels. See, we can push for an approach that attacks poverty and inequality, one that gives people hope and confronts the rising divisions polluting our political system. But we will fail unless we make change work for working people. This can't be an afterthought or a nice thing that we think about only after we deprive whole communities and regions of their economic life. See, to be clear, the solution is never going to be perfect. Every source of energy, every technology, both creates jobs and has environmental consequences. Solar, wind, hydro, you name it. But only carbon emissions threatens to destabilize the ecosystems that we depend on, and with them, civilization itself. That means if we're going to fight climate change effectively, we must be open to all methods of reducing carbon emissions, including technologies that some environmentalists don't want to consider. We can only solve the challenge of climate change when we find a formula based on clean energy and also meets the real needs of regular people in their everyday lives. Decent work, pay, access to energy and water, health care, food security, and the list goes on and on. The alternative is the continued politics of stalemate, inaction, and worse. See, there are voices around the world seeking to use the fear of change to turn working people towards hatred and division in the service of authoritarian politics. When the movement to fight climate change ignores the issue of economic justice or treats it as an afterthought. When we seek to address climate change without respecting the hard work and the sacrifice of workers in the energy and manufacturing sectors whose jobs are threatened, we feed the forces who are trying to tear us apart. See, the stakes are enormous. If we don't get this right, we could find that our democracy fails before our climate, as rising fear and rising hate converge on us faster than rising seas. Think about this for just a second. For years, this country is fueled by energy that was carbon-based. The progress that was made, every person in the country shared in that progress. And now we're trying to move away from carbon fuels, and we say, let them have that problem. We'll just move forward. We've never done it as a country when we faced challenge before. We shouldn't be doing it right now. We ought to be facing this problem in solidarity. All of us together, all of us sharing the sacrifice and the cost, and all of us being able to look to a better future. See, the labor movement here in the United States and globally is blazing a different path than what I just suggested. We're ready to be part of this fight. And we can use this historic moment of collective action to defend our democracies and our planet and build a prosperous future for all those who call it home. I look forward to doing that. I look forward to giving to my grandchildren a safer, cleaner, more opportunist America and country and globe than I had whenever I grew up. Thanks for listening. Let's get at it.
And thank you for indeed the invitation. And Art, we're grateful to be on your territory, and of course to stand with my great friend and ally on both your national issues but our international issues, Richard Trumka, because often you know Richard as your national leader, but he is a backbone and a rock for social justice, for workers' rights, for support and solidarity around the world. And so we very much appreciate him too. I wanted to actually basically compliment Richard's speech by saying to you that the climate crisis and the impact on our industries and jobs is not just a national problem, it's a global problem. And it is the biggest systemic transformation of all sectors that we will face. But why are we facing this? Well, Richard said it, but hothouse Earth is bearing down on us. And business as usual is a recipe for disaster. We have driven a union campaign for climate action and just transition under a simple banner. There are no jobs on a dead planet. With record temperatures around the world, even Europe has experienced a summer with historic levels of heat, plus fires and floods that you've seen in other parts of the world. I felt like, as an Australian living in Belgium, that I was back home. It was that hot and the risks were that high. But indeed, there is growing alarm amongst people because of this, but there's still a lack of ambition from our national governments. Rather than heading for under 2 degrees, we are currently heading towards 4. And at 4 degrees, the planet is simply uninsurable. If you want to look at an economic meter, it's simply uninsurable. At 3 degrees, the assets of working people are not affordable in terms of our people being able to insure them. And of course, when lives and livelihoods are already on the front lines, being lost to extreme weather events in too many parts of the world, including another extreme event you're facing, as Richard said, today, tomorrow, for the rest of the week. We are simply running out of time. So the union has a response. We have a response. We actually have spoken with one voices. I've been privileged to have union negotiators on a team, and collectively they have gone to their governments with the same message. With the settlement of the Paris Climate Agreement, the ITUC, with the other regional federations, in partnership with our national centres and our global union federations or industrial structures, we have taken up these questions. We got the commitment in the Paris Agreement to just transition. Now, that's not a universally loved term, but it's a global term that actually says, despite the bastardry, technical term, of previous transitions, then in fact, we want this one to be just. And we established, after rising from Paris, a Just Transition Centre, and Samantha Smith, who's working with many of the unions, is here, our director from the centre, and we're very proud of the work that they are doing. What we aim to do is make sure Labor's at the table. It's that simple. Richard said it. If you want to move forward, you've got to move forward with us. We're the people who can cut the deals, bring the workers behind us, make sure the skills are there, look after the demands around pensions, bargain for the guarantees, and indeed demand the investment in the communities that will establish an economic base of opportunity and hope. So we are central to this, and that's our message, and it's the work in partnership that our Just Transition does with unions and communities around the world. But you know, this year, the international governments threw us a big challenge. They're taking the climate conference in December back to Poland. Well, we care about the Polish miners, but can I tell you, putting the climate conference right in the middle of Katowice, the middle of the Silesia coal mining centre, is nothing but provocative. But we'll be up to it. We have three ambitions, and they haven't changed, that governments raise their ambition. We simply can't stabilise the planet at 2 degrees or less if we maintain a business as usual approach. That global financing for mitigation and adaptation be realised. Neither just development or a sustainable planet will be attained without a solidarity that ensures finance is available for the infrastructure, the services, the just transition measures available for poorer communities, governments, nations, as well as for our own. And of course, that in that light, that measures for just transition be included in all national development plans. It's not good enough that our governments actually say that, they have targets. We know the targets won't be realised unless we have a plan where unions are at the table and you can explain it to people and provide the hope that that brings. So this year we're challenging the governments at the climate conference to operationalise the Paris commitment. We have a Katowice declaration, and it is all about unions at the table, consultation with unions, making sure that those plans with governments are part and parcel of moving forward. Now, unions, of course, must be at the negotiating table everywhere, and we can be proud of many, many examples of unions taking the lead. Just to name a few, we have people in the room with Hans Christian from Oslo, where they're looking at the real challenge of effectively carless cities, mass transit, clean cities, and that work is being done with our unions there, plus a range of other areas of negotiation about the supply chain in terms of mass transit and so on. In Oslo. What am I talking about? In Oslo, Hans Christian. In Vancouver, Irene's somewhere in the room, and we have another partnership, and that's a real community partnership to listen to the Indigenous people in a recent roundtable we had, along with unions and other community groups, with Irene driving the government to have ambition for the beautiful city of Vancouver is just as inspirational. And then yesterday I met with your folk from Climate Jobs New York. You know, I sat last year, it was only last year, it seems like an age ago, with the governor of New York on a panel at Climate Week, and when he said he was actually going to retrofit 700,000 buildings in the state of New York, I'm going, that's a lot of jobs. That's a real lot of jobs. And so the New York union spoke to us about what their ambitions were, and they're going from strength to strength. And now we're putting the partnerships together internationally. The pension funds in Denmark investing in wind are going to be part of the solution for offshore wind that the unions envisage, with the backing of the governor in New York. And then, of course, you have companies, energy distributors and buyer companies. This week with us, will in fact launch a pledge. It's a terrible language, but it's the language of the week. The pledge in my language is you give up drinking. Well, you know, but not anytime soon. I'm not as pure as Richard Trumka, who's got much more discipline than me. But nevertheless, they're making a pledge that they will be committed to freedom of association, the right to unionise, the right to organise, to labour rights generally, to occupational health and safety, and something that doesn't exist in your country, but to dialogue with you. Because as European investments in particular, and I think Christine is here from NL, who's been one of our partner companies, have agreements with the Italian unions, want to take the dialogue international and work with Richard and the unions here, and we'll be talking about that later today. But they will be public on the stage at GCAS with us tomorrow, saying that unions should be at the table. And that's the message, amongst others. And I must say thank you to Christina, because she's with her boss, who they call the greenie in the energy scene in Europe, has brought the Euroelectric group of countries, the European distributors, producers and distributors together around the commitment to these principles. And then, of course, we have to look at communities. And I know you've got communities right across the country that are devastated already, without withdrawing some of the livelihoods from fossil fuel industries. We need to look after those communities. And I must say, having fought in my own country, I just wanted to have one example from Australia. I could have picked a couple, terribly nasty ones like Hazelwood, 20 years in the making, but Port Augusta, a little town in the desert in South Australia, the community and the unions worked for 5 years to get a smooth transition. And it was to move from coal-fired power station to solar thermal, because they'd done their due diligence, they'd done all the feasibility study, and it was the closest skill set match. And those of you in the industry will know why that is. And also in a desert town, it allowed them to build hot houses that would grow vegetables in the desert, and with some demonstration models, they're now doing that. So new industries, plus the supply chain of the manufacturing base. Well, they got so close, and the government, the state and national governments failed them. It's now on the agenda. There is a solar panel, there is a solar thermal project there now, but 1 year, the company lied, you know, we're used to that, and it shut it down quicker. And so 1 year, they waited with desperation as they watched their fathers and sons and brothers lose their jobs, and the odd sister as well. But now they do have construction. They fought, they stayed the distance, we backed them in. You know, it helped that we had the Australian labour movement behind them, and that's now going to be a good news story. A tiny little community, gateway to the desert, will have a livelihood with differing industries as well for the future. And then we have been seeing unions that are successful. Unions have demanded, call it what you like, just transition commissions, task forces, etc. But we have a task force in Canada. Gil, I don't know if you're in the room, but Gil started this out of Alberta and has a just transition from exit from coal with the Alberta government. But now it's national-wide, and the unions are indeed co-chairing that. New Zealand, Scotland, Germany. I won't go through it, but we're building these commissions and trying to support Labor to actually negotiate just transition measures. And then, of course, in California, you have a significant leadership here. A sustainable future has been on the agenda here for many, many years. I know in the 90s you can trace back legislation, but I also know what a fight it was for the Californian unions to actually establish the commitments to good jobs, to union jobs, to organised labour. And of course, you are leaders in solar, and other union movements are learning from you, I know. As the 5th largest economy in the world, this is actually pretty significant. So the work you do here is actually really important for the rest of the globe as well. And where you've managed to unionise, get prevailing wage rates in new sectors, you're showing just what can be done. So the importance of today's discussions are both nationally important but internationally important. They're our issues globally: adaptation and resilience, energy efficiency, skills and apprenticeships, transit and smart growth, clean electricity, manufacturing futures, and transport and logistics. And I want to just give a plug to our transport workers, because they'll be on centre stage at GCAS as well, with a partnership with the C40 and Steve Cotton, who heads up the International Transport Federation, that again, working with our Just Transition Centre, we've managed to start these global conversations that are now resulting in agreements. Think of the jobs in mass transit in growing cities all across the world. Clean transit that actually provides security and affordable transport for workers. So I will tell you that the baseline for us in terms of just transition measures are guaranteed pensions with an income bridge to retirement where necessary, a package of support with income, skills and redeployment support for any displacement, and investment in communities to ensure economic renewal. And it doesn't just stop, I know I've just gotten over 1 minute, but it doesn't just stop at the companies. It's also our investors, our pension funds, and we've spent the last 2 days talking about that with our Workers' Capital Committee. And we will launch, in partnership with the Principles for Responsible Investment, Harvard, and indeed the London School of Economics and the ITC this week, a call to investors to make sure that they only invest in companies where they're committed to just transition measures. So we think that we can do it. We know we can do it. We know the urgency of industrial transformation is not going away, and we'll either harness it for jobs or we will let the opportunity go by. But as Richard says, we will in fact leave nobody behind. And that's why, you know, we have coined a global framework for getting this done. In short, we have a lot of work to do. I don't want to understate the difficulty, the demands. I know that there are people here, including Rich and I, who are some of the only people on the planet to walk the coalfields and tell miners that it's over. That takes incredible courage, and it breaks your heart. Must break Richard's heart even more than mine, because that's his union. But I grew up in my own country respecting the guts and the community solidarity of the mine workers. And when you have to tell them, I say to them, I'm not going to lie to you, but we will not let you go without support. We will not let your communities go while we've got a breath to fight with you. And it'll be the same for fossil fuel workers, and it'll be the same for any industry where we see the need to move through changing nature of jobs. But our ambition now is very simple. It's to grow quality, organised jobs on a living planet, but with all of our people on board. Solidarity, and thank you.